A cheek swab from a barn cat in a fishing village no one's heard of just matched a genetic signature that hasn't shifted in over 1,000 years. That cat, wet-furred, yellow-eyed, 14 pounds of muscle and indifference, is not a stray. It is a living artifact. And the woman holding the DNA results in a sterile lab 200 miles south of that village. She's been waiting 3 months for this confirmation. Her hands aren't steady.
Is unchanged. We ran it 4 times. This barn cat in Nusfjord.
Nusfjord. If you've never heard the name, that's because fewer than 20 people live there year-round. It sits on the underside of the Lofoten archipelago, red wooden boathouses hammered into granite, the Norwegian Sea grinding against dock pilings that have been replaced so many times nobody counts anymore. The air tastes like salt and dried cod. Gulls own the sky. And cats own everything else. They're not house cats. Not the way you'd picture one. These animals are built for something. 14, 15, sometimes 16 pounds of dense bone and layered fur. A double coat, woolly undercoat tight against the skin, long, water-shedding guard hairs on top, that sheds rain like oilskin. Paws tufted with fur between the toes, spreading wide on snow like natural snowshoes. Ears tipped with lynx-like tufts that aren't decorative. Every feature on this cat is an answer to a question the Norwegian winter asked, a very long time ago. The Norwegian Forest Cat, the Norse Skogkatt, and its origin story is not what the breed registries tell you. Most breed histories start with a person, a breeder, an aristocrat, someone who decided an animal should look a certain way and bent genetics until it did. The Skogkatt is different. This breed wasn't designed in a kennel. It was designed by 1,600 years of Scandinavian winter, by ice storms and prey scarcity and temperatures that kill anything without the right coat, the right metabolism, the right instinct to shelter.
People want a romantic origin. Vikings, longships, Valhalla's sacred cats. And yes, the Vikings are part of this story, but the genetics tell us the foundation population was older than the Viking Age itself. These cats were adapting to Scandinavian conditions while the Roman Empire was still standing.
Here's where it gets strange. When geneticists mapped the mitochondrial DNA of Norwegian forest cats and compared it to the global feline database, they found something nobody predicted. The Skogkatt's maternal lineage traces to cats that arrived in Scandinavia through 2 separate migration events. The first, ancient, pre-Viking, likely followed early trade routes from the Near East through continental Europe, the same slow northward drift that brought domestic cats to every farming settlement on the continent. These cats arrived and adapted. The cold stripped away everything that didn't serve survival. Thin coats vanished from the gene pool. Small bodies couldn't hold enough heat. Within generations, natural selection was sculpting a new kind of cat. The second migration, that's the Viking chapter, and it changed everything. Around the 8th and 9th centuries, Norse sailors began carrying cats on their longships, not as pets, not as sacred companions, but as working pest control. Grain stores on a longship attract rats. Rats eat grain. Cats kill rats. The math was simple. And the cats that survived those voyages, across the North Sea to Scotland, to Iceland, to the Faroe Islands, possibly even to Vinland, those were the toughest, most cold-adapted felines on the planet. Torbjørn Kvam is 83 years old. He's fished out of Nusfjord his entire life, and his family has kept forest cats, never called them that, just cats, for as far back as anyone can remember. No papers, no pedigree, no one in his family ever walked a cat into a show ring. These animals lived in the boathouse, the barn, the kitchen if the winter got bad enough. They earned their keep. And they carried something in their blood that Dr. Cleveland's lab would not discover for another 60 years. A genetic signature linking a fisherman's barn cat to the cats that sailed with Leif Erikson. The same mitochondrial thread, unbroken, running from a Viking longship's grain hold to a wooden rawbua in Nusfjord. But that thread almost snapped. By the 1930s, the Norwegian forest cat was vanishing, not from predators, not from disease, but from something far more ordinary. Crossbreeding! Common domestic shorthairs spreading through Norway's farms and villages, mating freely with the forest cats, diluting the genetics that 1,000 winters had forged. The breed that survived the Viking Age was being erased by house cats. And that is where the real story begins. By 1938, a handful of Norwegian cat fanciers had started to panic. The cats they'd grown up with, the massive, thick-coated forest cats of the countryside, were getting harder to find. Every generation, the kittens looked a little thinner, the coats a little shorter, the wild proportions a little more ordinary.
We could see it happening year by year. The old type was dissolving. The big males with the full ruff and the tufted ears, you used to see them on every farm. By the late 30s, you had to go looking. And every year you had to look harder.
Ragna Vestby was among the first to sound the alarm. She'd grown up on a farm outside Bergen, where forest cats hunted in the birch woods behind the barn. By the time she was 40, those cats had been replaced by something less. Smaller animals with thinner coats and shorter fur. The genetics of a 1,000-year adaptation were being quietly overwritten by domestic shorthair, DNA, flowing through Norway's unfenced, freely breeding cat population. The crisis wasn't dramatic. Nobody poisoned the cats, nobody banned them. They just blended away. The most ordinary kind of extinction, genetic absorption. The forest cat wasn't killed. It was diluted. Then World War II hit Norway, and breed preservation dropped off everyone's list. 5 years of German occupation, food rationing, survival priorities that made cat breeding absurd. The forest cat slid further toward genetic oblivion, while the country fought for its own survival. After the war, the effort restarted, but barely. A scattered network of enthusiasts began searching the countryside for cats that still looked like the old type. Full double coat, heavy bone structure, lynx-tipped ears, the triangular head with the strong jaw. They drove to remote farms, to fishing villages, to mountain homesteads where isolation had protected the old genetics from crossbreeding. Torbjörn's cats, unregistered, unrecognized, living on dried fish scraps and whatever they hunted in the rocks above the harbour. No one in Nusfjord cared about breed standards. These cats earned their place by keeping rodents out of the fish drying racks. They'd been doing it for generations, and their genetics reflected that. Uninterrupted, unmanaged, shaped by nothing except the demands of the Norwegian coast. In 1972, a formal breeding program launched. Enthusiasts registered foundation cats, animals sourced from farms, forests, and fishing villages across Norway. The Breed Club established a standard. Selective breeding began in earnest, and in 1977, the Norwegian forest cat received official recognition from the Fédération Internationale Féline, FIFE. The breed was saved. Except, saving a breed and preserving a breed are not the same thing. "40 founders, 40 cats carrying the weight of an entire breed's genetic future. Every Norwegian forest cat with championship papers descends from that tiny group. Every one. And what happens when you build a population from 40 founders? You get a phenomenon geneticists call a bottleneck, a compression of genetic diversity so severe that recessive problems, hidden for generations, start surfacing with alarming frequency.
Glycogen storage disease type 4, GSD4. It's a lethal recessive condition. Kittens born with it rarely survive past 5 months. In a genetically diverse population, 2 carriers almost never meet. In a population descended from 40 cats, the carriers meet constantly. The math is brutal.
GSD4, a metabolic disorder that prevents the body from properly processing glycogen. Affected kittens develop progressive neuromuscular degeneration, muscle wasting, organ failure. There is no treatment. The only tool is genetic testing, identifying carriers and breeding them away from other carriers. It works, but it only works if you're willing to test and willing to remove popular cats from breeding programs when they test positive.
The breed standard exists to protect the breed's identity. Without a standard, without selective breeding, the Norwegian Forest Cat would dissolve back into the general cat population within a generation. Standardization is preservation.
Edvard Falk sits on the FIFA Breed Standard Committee. He's not wrong. Without a defined standard, breeds lose coherence. But the standard describes what a Norwegian forest cat should look like. It says nothing about genetic diversity, nothing about effective population size, nothing about whether the breed's gene pool is deep enough to sustain itself across the next 50 generations without accumulating lethal recessives like sediment in a narrowing river. The show ring rewards beauty. DNA doesn't care about beauty. It cares about variety, and variety is exactly what a 40-founder bottleneck destroys. So if the registered show population is genetically narrow, where does the missing diversity still exist? The answer was sitting in a boathouse in Nusfjord, eating dried cod, unbothered by pedigrees. Dr. Astrid Cleveland drove to Nusfjord in the winter of 2019. 8 hours from her lab in Aars, the last 90 minutes on a road that hugs the coast of the Lofoten Islands like a rope bridge over dark water. She carried a cooler full of sterile swabs and a hypothesis that most of her colleagues considered generous.
The registered population is a closed book. 40 founders, traced and documented. But Norway is full of cats.
She found Torbjørn Kvam through the local postman, the kind of introduction that only works in a village of 20. The old fisherman didn't understand why anyone from a university cared about his cats, but he let her swab them. 7 cats, ranging from a grizzled 18-year-old Tom with one ragged ear to a litter of 5-month-old kittens already developing the characteristic double coat. 3 months later, the results arrived. And they confirmed what Cleveland had suspected, but the scale of the confirmation surprised even her.
Torbjørn's cats carried 14 alleles that are either extremely rare or completely absent in the registered show population. 14! That's not noise. That's a genetic reservoir. Those cats have been breeding in relative isolation for decades, possibly longer, maintaining diversity that the show population bottleneck squeezed out.
14 alleles, 14 genetic variants preserved in a fisherman's barn cats that the show world had lost. Each one a potential buffer against the lethal recessives accumulating in the registered population. Each one a piece of the breed's original genetic identity, erased from pedigree lines, but alive in Nusfjord. The question became political almost immediately. If these unregistered cats carry vital genetic diversity, should they be brought into the breeding program?
Opening the stud book to unregistered animals undermines decades of careful selection. We do not know the parentage of these cats. We cannot verify.
We can verify their lineage with a cheek swab and 48 hours of lab work. DNA does not require a paper trail. These cats are the lineage. They just never had anyone write it down.
The tension between a stud book, a closed registry that defines who belongs, and a gene pool that needs fresh input to stay healthy. It is the tension between identity and survival. And it has no clean answer. But in Nusfjord, the cats don't know any of this. They sleep in the boathouse. They hunt between the rocks when the tide pulls back. They carry 14 alleles that a geneticist in Ars considers a treasure, and a judge in Helsinki considers a contamination risk. The cats themselves carry the weight of that argument in their cells, without feeling a gram of it. 800 miles south of Nusfjord, in a fourth-floor apartment in Tromsø, another Norwegian forest cat lives a different version of the same ancient story.
His name is Burke. 14 pounds. He takes up half the sofa and most of the bed.
Burke, a registered Norwegian forest cat with a 5-generation pedigree and a championship bloodline. He eats premium kibble from a ceramic bowl and sleeps on a heated floor with a view of the Arctic cathedral. His world is temperature-controlled, predator-free, and roughly 900 square feet. And yet, that coat, the dense, woolly undercoat pressed tight against his skin, the long guard hairs shedding water he'll never encounter, paws still tufted for snow he'll never walk through, ears still tipped with the lynx tufts that broke wind on open longships 1,000 years before his birth. Every cell in Burke's body is a letter in a message written by the Norwegian winter over 100 generations. The coat is the most obvious sentence, but the genetics run deeper. Metabolic adaptations for fat storage in lean months, a skeletal density that anchors a large frame on icy surfaces, a prey drive calibrated for the burst and weight hunting pattern of subarctic rodents, all of it encoded, all of it carried forward, all of it technically unnecessary on a heated floor in Tromsø, and all of it absolutely, irreplaceably, what makes this cat this cat.
The breed standard describes an appearance. The genome describes a survival strategy. When those two things align, you have a healthy breed. When they diverge, when we breed for appearance and forget the genome, we lose the thing that made the breed extraordinary in the first place.
We did not create the Norwegian forest cat. We didn't engineer its coat, or design its bone structure, or program its metabolism. 1,000 Scandinavian winters did that work, patiently, brutally, across more generations than any breeder could count. What we did was notice the result, give it a name, write a standard, build a registry, and in doing so, we captured a snapshot of something wild and turned it into something managed. The question Legacy asks, what do we owe those who came before, has an answer in the Skogkatt story. We owe them honesty. We owe the 1,000 winters that built this breed the respect of maintaining its genetic depth, not just its visual profile. We owe the cats in Torbjorn's boathouse the recognition that their DNA is not contamination. It is the original text, and the registered population is the edited copy. In Tromsø, the northern lights ignite above the strait. Green and violet curtains rippling across a sky so vast, it makes the city look temporary. In Helga's apartment, Burke lifts his head from the sofa cushion and turns toward the window. His eyes, copper gold, slit-pupilled, calibrated for hunting in perpetual dusk, catch the light. He is 14 pounds of legacy, 1,000 years of Norwegian memory encoded in double-layered fur, heavy bone, and a mitochondrial signature that links him to a cat on a Viking longship, a wildcat in a birch forest, a barn cat in Nusfjord, and a kitten born in a registered cattery with a 5-generation pedigree. He doesn't know any of this. He knows the sofa is warm. He knows Helga's hand on his ruff feels right. He knows the lights in the sky are moving, and that's worth watching. That is enough. The memory is in the blood. It doesn't need to be understood, to be carried forward.